G'day everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Drone U. Tonight we have a special guest with us who's going to be co-hosting, the lovely Tom Pills. How you going, mate?
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, thanks. Nice to be called lovely. Thank you. So you're my mother, limited to saying that. Appreciate it.
It's a blessing. Thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Yes, and thanks for jumping in and filling in Sean's spot for the evening.
Yeah, he called in 5 minutes ago and said he's sick, didn't he?
No, he's on a flight, so...
Well, for everyone that doesn't know, so Tom Pills is the drone lawyer. If you're in the commercial drone industry, you've probably heard his name thrown around. Tom specialises in drone law and regulations surrounding this awesome and rapidly growing industry of human ingenuity. Also, Tom is a litigation expert representing a range of clients from foreign government-formed entities to small businesses. Yeah, I wasn't reading off the script completely, was I?
Thanks for the intro, Danny.
Right, mate, thanks for correcting a lot of my spelling mistakes. So tonight, Tom's going to lead us through a couple of, legal tips on running your drone businesses. Main three topics we're going to start with, to kind of get the ball rolling, will be strict liability, going Guarantor and Director ID, which we're going to learn a lot tonight, guys.
Yep. There's a lot to learn.
There is, mate. This whole industry, there's a lot to learn. But, Tom, you want to kick it off with a bit of strict liability? Sounds kind of kinky.
Well, first, boring lawyer disclaimer. Obviously, none of this is legal advice, because to give legal advice, you have to know someone's scenario and then apply the law to their situation. We're not doing that. We're keeping it pretty broad. But if anyone wants to be in contact after on any of these topics, I'm more than happy to unpack it further. And I thought, as we've discussed with you, Danny and Ty, we'll cover sort of three broad topics today, three broad commercial topics. If it goes well, if the audience likes this stuff, there's a lot more legal topics, little tidbits I can share and we can unpack over the time. But if no one likes it, if it's a snooze fest, equally, that's fine. I've got to do what the audience likes. But topic one, we're looking at strict liability, and a lot of you, if you've read the regs, you would have seen the word strict liability peppered around. And so the vast majority of drone offences are strict liability. And what a strict liability offence is, it's one where it doesn't matter whether or not you intended to commit the offence. If you perform the physical act, you're guilty. A good everyday example, speeding in your car. Doesn't matter if you didn't know what the speed limit was or didn't know if you were speeding. If you're speeding, you get done. And I think a more applicable example to our industry is you generally can't operate your drone above 400 feet AGL, right? And that's under good old CASA instrument 2222. If you don't know about CASA instrument 2222, talk to me about that, because you have to know what that means. That is key, right? Gents, 2222?
Yep.
It took over 50. Do you remember when it took over? It took over 50.
I can't quote my own phone number.
It took over one of the old regs. It took over 5520. If you remember all the instruments. Anyway, that's some really important stuff in that. So we all know that you can't fly above 400 feet AGL, and that's the event of strict liability. So if you're flying above 400 feet, but you didn't know you were flying above 400 feet, or you didn't mean to, or if you just didn't know it was an offence to fly above 400 feet AGL, none of those amount to a defence. Under strict liability, you did it, you're done.
Okay.
Okay. So there's no, there's no way basically around that, more or less. If you're doing it, you're done, more or less.
It's like a no ignorance is bliss kind of thing. We're not in this.
Ignorance is no excuse for law. Well, there's one potential defence. It's a bit of a curly one. It's called defence of honest mistake of fact. It's pretty technical, and it requires more than just knowing. It requires more than just not knowing you're breaking the law, right?
So, a disclaimer on this section.
I can explain the concept and then give a hypothetical example, and then we can then unpack it after that. Yeah. To have a defence of this honest mistake, you have to have had an honest and reasonable belief in your mind about what you were doing, which, if actually existed, meant you weren't breaking the law. Okay. But here's an example to flesh it out. So, hypothetical example with 400 feet AGL. If you're flying high 300s maybe, and you think you're under, but if your remote pilot station, for example, was playing up, and suddenly you were flying above 400 feet, and you thought you were, and your remote pilot station told you were, then you had an honest and reasonable belief you're under 400 feet. But if you were above, then you get in trouble. Or if you get caught, then one defence you might have is honest mistake of fact. But to prove that, you then have to go to court. You'd have to get an expert report on your remote station to say that, okay, it was playing up and he was above, but he thought he was below. So it's pretty full on to sort of.
Basically, you'd have to have the evidence there to show otherwise that there was a technical error or something in your control or something like that to prove that you didn't know that you were above 400 AGL.
Precisely, mate. Exactly.
One thing to bring up as well with especially DJI drones, considering they have 90% of the market, every single input of that stick you have is recorded. You can go into air data and check every single voltage, flare, anything. So this, there's always a record of what you've done. So to actually prove that something malfunctioned, there's already evidence there.
Interesting. And that's where that's that type of stuff you have to pull up in a court if you wanted to defend yourself in that regard. So it's tricky. So, yeah.
And it's kind of like metadata. You can't exactly edit it. Well, actually, you can edit metadata, but don't.
Yes, you can, but you shouldn't.
You shouldn't, especially if you've got a country link
edit metadata. Note that, listeners, do not edit your metadata.
Well, who's the lawyer now?
No, I'm not a lawyer.
No, cool. So I hope that sort of makes sense. But we all know if you do it, then you're pretty much done unless you've got a really good excuse or really thought you were and had a reasonable basis for your belief. That's the only way to get out. Really.
Exactly. And then realistically, how many times have you been pulled over doing 150 and 100 zone? The cops aren't going to let you off. It's the same thing with this.
It's it. Unless your speeder was playing up.
End of the day, the moral of the story is there. Just follow the rules. Do as you're told.
There's a reason for it, because as soon as you go to 500 down an aircraft, well, the whole industry is going to be down on you.
Yeah. And that's reflected in the strict liability level of sort of the standard, in that there's not much to it. Yeah. Exactly. There's no intention element, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure.
Well, I'll learn something new tonight. Don't speed, hypothetically.
Yeah, right, Danny.
I have a V8 for a reason, but with the fuel price now, I'm not going anywhere. I guess you have a bit of sound advice for us, Tom, around going Guarantor, which goes beyond also the drone industry itself.
Yeah, this is very broad. You might have come across this in different areas, but just a tip as well, because if you are not as an operator operate a company, then all the contracts you enter are generally on behalf of your company. And the whole idea is to sort of insulate your personal liability from that of your company. So it's sort of keep the risk off you personally. But some agreements might be a lease, might be a loan, a lot of different contracts and things you'll enter might ask for you to go guarantor for your company. So what that means, if the company signs, but they say you sign here as well, and if it goes pear-shaped, if the company doesn't meet its obligations or breaks the contract and can't meet the obligations, they can then people on the other side of the contract can chase you personally to get the money or to perform the service. And so signing a guarantee somewhat sort of undermines the whole idea of setting up a company to protect your personal liability, because it puts you on the line personally. So sort of the takeaway there is always make sure that if a contract that your company signs asks for a personal guarantee, I'd be reluctant. So just be careful of the old sign here, and here, and just sign it. Just be careful.
Is it fairly common? Like, I mean, I've never come across it, and there's probably been times I probably haven't read things as strong as I probably should have. But is it something that you come across fairly commonly, or is it pretty rare?
Sometimes I see it a lot in commercial leases. I know a lot of us are signing commercial leases all the time. I see it a lot there. Some loans. I've done a lot of construction contracts, and a lot of those have the person or another company having to go guarantor. So no, I've seen it in a big variety of contracts, it's guarantor, and you'll either say it. The one way to pick it up is either it'll say it somewhere there, or where you sign, there'll be a separate signature block for you to sign, not for your company, but for you personally, and that's what we've got to be wary of.
So might not even use the actual word guarantor itself.
No, it should. It will say guarantee or guarantor somewhere. It should say that.
See, I wasn't aware that you see that on a lot more things. Obviously, most people would be aware that with home loans and things like my first home, my father was my guarantor. Obviously that's the most common place people see it. But so you tend to see it in a lot of other places as well.
Yeah, a lot of various contracts will have guarantor. They'll try to slip in guarantor provisions. Our first instinct typically is to push back because this entity is entering a contract for a reason. They want someone else to enter it to bolster them, similar to the real estate thing. You don't want to bugger it up because and sometimes you have to look if you can have it removed, great. But if it's a really big deal and you're happy to take the risk, that's what business is about, right? Taking risks and having a swing, do it. Like, don't lose the contract if it's very important to you, or if you think you're pretty certain that you're going to be able to meet the obligations. Cool. In the first instance, maybe give it a nudge back to see if they'll take it off.
Yeah, I guess it's something to be aware of. I mean, end of the day, if you're signing that and you're not capable of achieving what's required of that contract, you're definitely digging yourself a little bit of a hole.
Yeah. I suppose you really do need to read every word of a contract.
Ideally, you should. I know we all take all our software. Yep, I agree to the new terms, and you sign away your life.
All the time now, when I'm installing software, it makes you scroll to the bottom. Then you got to wait like 30 seconds. I'm like, why can't I click yet? I totally have read it.
Read it, Danny. Read it.
It's like you think about, say, Facebook, when people are like, I don't want my images shared. It's like, well, as soon as you install the app and have an account, you've given away your rights essentially.
I think I mentioned to you, Danny, how Instagram actually wrote that into their contract and they didn't tell anyone. And I saw a good example of it with the New York Times. They actually used Instagram images of New York from all personal users. They put them all together as a giant mosaic on their front cover. And there was all this uproar because people were like, hey, that's my photo. Hey, that's my photo. I should be getting paid for this. But what no one actually was aware of was that Instagram wrote it into their contract. When you sign up and you log in and you create an account, you've waived all your rights to those images. So, instances like that, coming from a photography background, instances like that, you really should be reading those contracts to make sure that you're not getting screwed, basically.
Exactly. And I guarantee, I'd like to think at least most of the listeners here probably wouldn't have read every term and condition on Instagram or any other app they use. Like, sure as shit, I definitely haven't.
I've read more these days than I used to, but only due to the fact of that particular case was a slap in the face. So
when Tom says read it, we read it.
We read it. Yeah, exactly.
That data issue, Ty, brings up an interesting point as to the audience, these commercial operators. I know we've got both recreational and commercial, but if you're doing a commercial job and you've got a deliverable for someone, whatever data it is, whatever deliverable it's a data, it's a report. What are you doing with the data? Are you assigning all the data to them by giving them the job, or are you licensing it to them and you actually keep it? How do you want to treat the data that you're providing to your client after you capture all this data with your drone? And you can change that. Well, as Instagram screwed these people, well, they didn't screw them. It was in writing, although
it was in writing.
It was in writing. Similarly with the commercial drone operators, you can do things in your contract to say, okay, you get all the data, you get everything, or no, you just get this bit, or no, I own it, but I'll license it to you perpetually. So the pilot should think about too how they want to disseminate, give their data and what rights they want to keep. Say, look, you can have the data, but I want to be able to keep it for my own research purpose, and I want to be able to keep that data for my marketing purposes, so I can actually put it on my website.
Exactly, and that's pretty much what I did recently as well. I sold a bunch of imagery which was on my Instagram. Instead of selling exclusive rights, I was still allowed to use it for my own portfolio purposes, which works well for both parties. And you make $1 and someone's happy you got some great images.
Coming from photography background, I've had plenty of times where you've had people request for exclusive rights where they own the images, and as in general with photography, you generally own the images, but end of the day, I've had clients that want exclusive and they just pay for it basically. But you've always got to be aware, and then that, when you do that, you no longer own those images. You no longer have any control over that.
It's gone. It's not, say goodbye. Correct. Essentially. It's signing away your first child.
And people need to be aware of that with exclusives, because once you've done that, you no longer own the rights to those images. So always tread very carefully if you're handing out exclusives to people.
Yeah.
And that's obviously usually a transfer of copyright. that has embodied. And, copyright doesn't have to necessarily be registered. Copyright exists by virtue of you creating something. But then if you transfer it, then you're doing it. You're transferring it. Yeah,
exactly.
Right on. Well, there you go. Hopefully everyone learned a bit of extra out of that. Last point, I guess, Tom, is Director ID. What is this?
A mystery that is Director ID that we only found out about just recently.
It sounds like a new movie coming out. Tom Cruise in it, or
it's another more general, very commercial sort of development. So it applies to anyone who's listening or watching is a company director. It's this brand new thing. It's if you're a company director, it's a number you have to get. So it's a unique 15-digit number that you'll keep forever. So if you're a director of a company, they're trying to. I think the Australian Securities Investments Commission, they're trying to stop use of false or fraudulent director identities, because dodgy people are changing their name a bit, becoming director of a company, becoming director of another company, changing their name a bit. And if someone's chasing some dodgy bastard and they're different in each company, it's hard just to pin them down.
Yeah.
The whole idea of this director ID thing is to say, you're one person, you're 15-digit ID, and that'll follow you around forever. Whether you change company, stop being a director, change your name, or move overseas, that 15-digit number will stick with you forever. So it's
so it basically gives them the control to always have a track of who you are and what you're doing, basically, with the company.
That's it, yeah. And it's particularly for company directors, people, who are running companies, and it's just to stop dodgy companies, Phoenix companies that, wind up, then open the same company in a new proprietary limited the next day sort of thing. Yeah. To sort of stop all that dodgy stuff.
Stop them from, like I said, ripping off a bunch of employees and not paying whatever, and then just start up the next day.
That's it, exactly. That's what it tries to do. So it's a brand new thing, and it's the deadline's 30 November. It could be. Yeah.
Does that apply to, say, for example, my wife and I, we set up a company originally when I was starting a food truck to I guess shift the liability away from the personal. So she being the director of our company, she would need to get a director ID, correct?
Yeah. Is she currently a director still of any company?
Yeah, of our entity, our company that we created, yes. So yes. She would need to get one.
Yeah, mate, yeah, she will. And deadline is 30 November this year. And it might be sooner if you were a director. There's a certain period earlier in the year, if you became a director, you had 28 days to do it. But the ultimate deadline, no matter what, is 30 November. So get on it, because it's already June, obviously. Yeah. Super simple. You can do it in less than 10 minutes. If you've got your ID stuff on you, or you've got it handy, like your Medicare and stuff, I won't come in with the details, but a few of those usual documents, you can do about 10 minutes. 2 steps. One, you need the MyGov ID app. So not your MyGov account, that one that's linked to Medicare and stuff, not that one. It's the MyGov ID app.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you got to go onto the Australian Business Registry Service website, ABRS. Just Google ABRS. As long as it's the .gov website, good chance it's going to be legit, right? Because the legit ones have the .gov. You go on the ABRS, have your MyGov ID app. They talk to each other. 10 minutes later, boom, you got your 15-digit number. That's it. Done. You're done. Easy. So this only applies if you're a sole trader or a partner or whatever as a drone operator. Don't worry about it. Only if you run a company and you're a director of that company do you need to do this. Other than that, don't worry about it.
Sweet. Well, for pretty much anyone listening, it'll always be good to look into it. I literally just typed in Director ID right now, and I found all the information on ABRS's website. Not hard to do, as you said, Tom.
Yeah, 10 minutes, you'll get your new number.
Beautiful.
But just, you've got it. If you're running a company and you're director, just do it. 10 minutes, boom. Yeah. Because 30 June will come before you know it, and then the ATL will start chasing people, and ASIC will chase people or whatever. So
they're always collecting some fines out of that, I'm sure of it.
Yeah, exactly. They're already starting for a few people. They're already due and chasing them up, so it's already happening.
I'm sure there's lots of listeners out there that didn't know this even existed, because we didn't until you originally told us 2 weeks ago. So,
well, I hope it helps. Hope to get a bit of value out of this without having too much of a snooze fest. Sorry, boys. I know there's a bit of
It's all very interesting, and it's saving people's butts, basically.
Exactly, keeping us out of trouble, because drone operators love getting in trouble.
and look, and I think our industry can be a little bit of a minefield too. And I think if people don't know all the ins and outs, it can come back to bite you. And then you'll have to call Tom and get Tom to represent you and try and keep you out of big trouble.
He's like, send the clients. I guess, Tom, where can everyone reach you at?
On my LinkedIn, or if you Google the drone lawyer, I should be somewhere around the top. Or email tom@thedronelawyer.com.au, tom@thedronelawyer.com.au. But I'm pretty easy. I think it should be easy-ish to find online. If you want to unpack any of those questions, got any just questions, basic questions, that's fine. And if you want to go into more detailed stuff about your ops, happy to do sort of 15-minute free consultations to get a picture of your operation, where you might have some pain points or some regulatory holes or worries. Happy to just have a free consultation to start, just to point you in the right direction. I'm as much just about education and self-help and helping you just stay in the sky and not have to worry about all this regulatory stuff on the ground as much as possible. So I can point you to information, absolutely. If you need advice, we can cross that bridge if we need to, but more about just educating and just empowering.
We'll put your website up in the comments and stuff as well for our YouTube and our listeners as well, so they can reach out to you and hopefully you can get them out of some trouble.
Or stop them from getting in trouble in the first place, I know.
I'll stop them getting in trouble. That's even better, exactly.
Yeah. Well, look, if anyone has any questions for Tom, that aren't actually requiring major advice, put them in the comments, and hopefully in the next episode or so, and Tom's on, we can bring him up and unpack them a bit better. Yeah,
definitely. And I think there's a lot of value there for listeners, and you may think some of these topics are a little bit snoozeworthy, but the thing is this is the stuff that we all need to be well across, and especially in our industry where regulations and stuff are constantly changing, and we all need to be across them. So having advice from someone like Tom is that's paramount to us. It's keeping in the air basically.
Also, I appreciate
it. Well, thanks again, Tom, for jumping on, and hopefully we'll see you very soon.
Indeed. Thanks, Jensen. Audience get some value out of it. Thanks for your time.
Cheers, mate. Catch you in the next one.
Thanks, boys.